Hello, English 101 students. Now that we've moved to online instruction for the rest of the semester, something I really wanted to do was to make instructional videos for you so you have extra support in addition to the online lectures and any of the readings that I assign. This particular one is on rhetorical analysis because this is going to be a really important foundation for the rest of the unit and even the rest of the semester. So the first thing to think about is what rhetoric actually is. And I think most students think rhetorical question when they think of the word rhetoric. But the most important thing to remember is that rhetoric is essentially the art of persuasion. It's the methods that the communicator uses in order to convince a target audience. There are several elements to consider when analyzing the rhetoric of any text. So for the purpose of this unit, any form of communication involving words, images, or sounds, or even body language and gestures can be considered a text. Just keep that in mind. So we're going to look at actually an advertisement because that's going to be one of the things that we're really zoning in on for the rest of the semester. Let's look at this one. We've got a Heinz ketchup advertisement. Super simple. You look at it and you're like, okay, I get it. This is for Heinz ketchup. But the point is that it's more than just an ad. It's a message, right? The communicator wants to send a message to their audience. So even though there are barely any words here, there's some elements that are sending us a very specific message, right? So we have this tomato top, and that sort of indicates fresh tomatoes. Even though we know it's ketchup, it's not fresh tomatoes, and honestly, Heinz is mostly sugar, but they want you to think that. They want you to feel like it's a fresh product. Then we have a lot of clear blank space, right? So they're like, instead of filling with words or information, they just decided to leave it blank and simple, which is really interesting. There's like the clear brand, right? We've got Heinz. It's right in the middle of the page, literally like right in the center, and it's a logo that most of us know. So that's kind of like important. It's in the forefront of the image. And then we've got this like uninterrupted view of pure ketchup, right? There's no labels. It's not on anything. There's no like air bubbles. It's literally just like pure ketchup. So even though there are very few words, I think the simplicity of the ad and that tomato top indicating an actual fresh tomato is Heinz's way of saying that ketchup is simple, clean, and made from real tomatoes, right? Instead of saying this is fancy ketchup or this is I don't know, ridden with sugar. It's definitely like a message that this is like pure, clean ketchup, which is something that people really care about these days. Moving forward, what I want us to think about is the rhetorical situation. Now, we looked at this ad, we kind of like made some assumptions about what the message might be, but one of the ways in which we're going to do that moving forward is by considering the context around everything that we read or look at, right? So the rhetorical situation has 5 main elements to consider. First, you want to consider the communicator. Who created this text, this ad, this piece of writing, whatever it is? The communicator is not necessarily the individual in the text, right? Because we know that a lot of companies use celebrity endorsements to promote their product and etc. But the communicator is the company, the individual, the entity that is behind the message. The target audience is a specific audience the communicator is targeting. Oftentimes, students are tempted to say that it is like anyone who might be interested in this lipstick or whatever, but in the end, the target audience is always going to be a very, very specific population. And oftentimes what's going to set that population apart is that they have a set of shared values that particular advertisement appeals to. Form has to do with how you receive the information. Is it an essay? Is it a print ad? Is it an Instagram ad? Is it a billboard? Is it, a report? What is the form of this text? The purpose is the reason why the text was being made. So obviously it's to convince, persuade, inform, one of those reasons, but it's up to you to kind of like dictate what the purpose is. And then the issue or the argument is, I guess, like, why why should the audience believe or subscribe to the message? Yeah, what is the message an answer to? And this will be a little bit clearer as we move forward. So I have this as an example. This is an old school Lucky's ad for Lucky's cigarettes. And I think like it was obviously made many years ago. I think I researched it and it was like the 30s or something. So let's take a look at this a little bit closer. If we want to determine the rhetorical situation, I think the first thing that we should do is look for the communicator, which is obviously Lucky Strike, right? We have like a clear brand here. It's not that guy. That guy is just a model or something. We don't know who he is, but he's not the communicator. Lucky Strike as a company is the communicator. The next thing to look at is the form. Sorry about that. The form is obviously a print ad. I don't think they had video advertisement back then, but this probably would have been in a magazine or as a flyer or something like that. Then we want to think about the target audience. Look at the guy, look at the words and stuff. Do you think the target audience is going to appeal to do you think this advertisement is going to appeal to like a 19-year-old rebel who wants to smoke cigarettes? I don't think so. I think that the fact that there's a person that's supposed to look like a doctor, he's a middle-aged white guy, seems to be middle class. It just seems like it's meant for a middle class audience, and probably a middle-aged audience as well. Maybe somebody who looks like the person in the ad. Yeah, as you can see, there he is. There's his wrinkles, his smile, his sophisticated glasses, his groomed hair, and all that jazz. That's a middle-aged, middle-class dude. The other thing is that it has to do with cigarettes being less irritating and that they're recommended by physicians, which I really think is something that an older audience would care more about than a younger audience who is probably going to be a little bit more carefree, a little bit more rebellious, etc. Now, looking for the purpose, obviously, is to convince, right? Lucky Strike wants to convince us to buy its cigarettes, but more than that, it's not just to buy the cigarettes, but that we should buy their cigarettes because they're better for you. And then the issue or the argument is that cigarettes in general are bad for you and irritate your throat. Now, that's probably something that was prevalent at the time, right? People want to smoke cigarettes, but over time they irritate your throat, they make you have that raspy voice, etc. And so the issue is that this problem exists, and then the purpose is to show you that this is the answer to that question. That these cigarettes are better. Okay. So now that we kind of understand rhetorical situation, which is essentially the context surrounding the text, we're going to move on to rhetorical appeals. There are three kinds of rhetorical appeals, and rhetorical appeals are basically the ways in which a communicator can appeal to the target audience, right? So these are going to comprise of the elements in the text. So some elements are going to be a logos appeal, which means an appeal to a person's logic. Some elements will be a pathos appeal, which is an appeal to emotion. And some will embody an ethos appeal, which is an appeal to authority. And I'll explain those a little bit further. We want to think about what kinds of elements those embody in different kinds of texts. So let's look a little bit closer at that chart. Excuse me. So pathos is, if you think about an advertisement that you've seen, usually if it's a video ad, there'll be music, or if you've seen like a documentary, there'll be music, there'll be sound effects, there'll be alarms, whatever it is. Pathos, since it appeals to feeling, I think sound is a very effective way to implement pathos in an advertisement. Colors are also very prominent, right? Because certain colors make you feel certain things. We associate colors with things. So, for example, red tend to be associated with like anger or passion or energy, whereas green is often associated with either envy or jealousy or like the earth, right? The way that we care about the earth. Facial expressions, body language, or tone of voice, any way that you connect with another human is something that provokes emotion. Descriptive or figurative language or imagery are also parts of pathos, and so is like the appeal to nostalgia or memory. So making us feel like we're returning to a better place in our lives or a better place in time. Let's see. The cat. Logos, an appeal to logos, is an appeal to logic or reasoning. So what you're going to look for are graphs, charts, or maps, anything that kind of organizes information or presents statistics, facts or statistics in general, logical reasoning or argumentation, so showing the logic of an argument, dates, times, locations, so any sort of like factual information or just information itself. And then ethos is an appeal to authority or credibility. So maybe a text that is produced by or features an expert of some sort, a celebrity endorsement, or emphasis on experience or expertise. So oftentimes a person who is writing something will demonstrate the level of experience that they have so that the audience is more likely to believe them. The bottom line here is that pathos is something that should make you feel something. Logos is something that should make you think something, and ethos is something that should make you trust or believe in something, if that makes sense. And these are some of the elements. These are some of the ways that these elements may be presented, but don't limit yourself to this list. So if you want to see how the appeals work in action, here's this ad again. So we've come back to this example that we've already determined the rhetorical situation for. And it uses all three rhetorical appeals. Not every ad will have all three. Not every text will have all three, but most of the time, the most effective ones are a balance of all three. So we can clearly say pathos because, I mean, the first thing we see is this guy's facial expression, right? He's smiling, he has a welcoming gesture, he's like offering the cigarettes kind of like enticingly. The colors are bright and friendly. We've got red, we've got yellow, and these particular colors are said to increase appetite. So maybe that also kind of is the idea behind making you desire a cigarette too, that they kind of like impulsive, like indulgent action of like consumption. We also have logos in here. They added statistics. There's a logical association between physicians and health, right? So if a physician recommends something, then we're going to assume that it's healthy. And then the inclusion of other facts, like Lucky's are less irritating and it's toasted. It's toasted refers to the way that the tobacco is processed. So they toast the tobacco in order to make it less bothersome to the throat. So those are all examples of logos. Ethos is the reference to the physicians, the use of a middle-aged man who looks like he could be a physician. So the idea is that the use of a person that looks like a doctor or referring to the fact that physicians say that Lucky's are less irritating is showing that there's like a element of expertise here, right? Somebody with a high degree in health is recommending these cigarettes over other cigarettes. So now that we kind of went through that, hopefully seeing it in action has sort of helped you kind of like understand how everything is at play. I want to kind of show you how this is going to help you in the rest